"It's my first time," whispered the young bride-to-be as she guided the Apache king through the ceremony. The young bride-to-be woke up early that morning, long before the sun had fully risen. The first soft rays of light were just touching the edges of her room, but her heart was already wide awake. Today was unlike any other day she had experienced. It was the day of the ceremony, a moment she had been preparing for, dreaming about, and even fearing at the same time. She sat by the window for a few quiet moments, looking out at the quiet streets of her town, noticing the soft fog lifting and the trees swaying gently in the morning breeze. Her mind wandered, imagining how the ceremony would unfold, how she would guide the Apache king through every step, and how she would carry herself in front of so many people watching. She could feel a flutter in her chest, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Her family had been preparing for this day for weeks. The house smelled of fresh flowers, the kind that her mother had carefully picked the day before. The soft fragrance of roses, lilies, and jasmine filled every corner, giving the house a sense of celebration even before the ceremony began. She could hear her younger siblings moving around, whispering and giggling in their rooms, trying not to disturb the careful quiet of the morning. Their excitement mirrored her own, and yet she felt a weight on her shoulders that only she could understand. She moved to her dressing area, where the traditional attire for the ceremony was carefully laid out. The colors were rich, deep, and full of meaning. Her dress was made of soft fabric, embroidered with intricate patterns that told stories of her ancestors and the land they had lived on for generations. Each stitch had a purpose, each pattern a memory. She ran her fingers lightly over the designs, feeling the work of hands that had cared deeply about preserving their culture. She paused for a moment, thinking about the responsibility she carried today, not just to perform her role correctly, but to honor the traditions that had been passed down for centuries. Her mother came in quietly, carrying a small tray with morning tea and a few sweet treats. She smiled at her daughter, sensing the mixture of nerves and excitement. "Take a deep breath," she said softly, her voice gentle but full of wisdom. "You have prepared for this. Just be yourself and the rest will follow." The young bride-to-be nodded, taking a sip of tea, feeling the warmth spread through her body. She tried to imagine herself walking through the ceremony, step by step, repeating in her mind the gestures and words she would need to guide the king through. It was a lot to remember, and she worried that even the smallest mistake could be noticed, could disrupt the harmony of the day. Once she finished dressing, she looked at herself in the mirror. She hardly recognized the young woman staring back. She looked calm and composed, though inside her heart raced. She remembered her first lesson in ceremony preparation, months ago, when she had stumbled over a simple step and felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had practiced and practiced, learning from her mistakes, and now here she was standing on the edge of the moment she had always imagined. She whispered to herself almost shyly, "I can do this. I will do this." Outside, the sounds of preparation began to fill the air. Villagers and family members moved around the ceremonial grounds, carrying decorations, arranging flowers, and checking every detail to make sure nothing was out of place. The soft hum of drums in the distance added a rhythm to the morning, signaling the start of something important. She could see the elders of the community, standing quietly but with eyes full of pride. They were watching, observing every movement, and she felt their silent support, which helped calm some of the butterflies in her stomach. When the Apache king arrived, she noticed the way he carried himself. There was a quiet strength in his posture, a calmness in his eyes, and a gentleness in his smile. He was a person who commanded respect, not through fear or force, but through presence and dignity. Her nervousness spiked again, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself that he was also a person, someone who trusted her to guide him through the ceremony. She stepped forward, curtsying lightly, and greeted him. His eyes softened as he returned the greeting, and she felt a small wave of relief wash over her. The ceremony began with traditional music, the soft sounds of flutes blending with the rhythmic beats of the drums. The young bride-to-be led the way, guiding the king step by step. She whispered instructions softly, careful not to rush or make it obvious how nervous she was. Every gesture had meaning, every movement a story. As she helped him navigate the ceremonial paths, she noticed how attentive he was, following her guidance with patience and respect. That encouraged her, and she began to feel a growing confidence, though she still kept her voice gentle and cautious. She remembered one particular step that had troubled her during practice, a sequence of hand movements and bowing gestures that had felt awkward at first. But today, with the ceremony in full motion, she performed them slowly and carefully, repeating the words in her mind. When she saw the king follow her exactly, she felt a rush of pride. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. She realized that it wasn't just about memorizing steps or performing perfectly. It was about sincerity, care, and respect for the tradition. As the ceremony continued, she noticed the expressions of those around her. Family members whispered to each other, pointing subtly at her and nodding with approval. Elders smiled quietly, their eyes gleaming with recognition of her effort. Even the villagers who had gathered to watch seemed drawn to the careful attention she gave to each detail. She felt a sense of connection not just to the king, but to everyone present. She was a bridge between generations, between tradition and the present moment, and it made her heart swell with both pride and humility. At one point, she paused for a moment and whispered softly to the king, almost in a confession, "It's my first time." She expected perhaps a judgment or even a hint of disappointment, but instead, he looked at her with calm reassurance. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes, a gentle acceptance that made her feel lighter. It was a reminder that courage wasn't about being perfect. It was about stepping forward despite fear. That simple exchange strengthened her resolve, giving her a renewed energy to continue guiding him through the ceremony. The young bride-to-be moved gracefully, though her mind was always alert, ready to correct any small misstep. She guided the king through the symbolic gestures of offering and receiving, showing him where to place his hands, how to bow, and when to speak the sacred words. She explained each step quietly, ensuring that he understood the meaning behind every action. She realized that guiding someone through tradition wasn't just about rules. It was about sharing the story, helping someone connect with the history, and honoring the effort of generations that came before. Time seemed to move slowly, each moment filled with care and attention. She noticed the sunlight growing stronger, casting warm beams over the ceremonial ground, highlighting the colors of her dress and the decorations. The flowers swayed slightly in the breeze, and the gentle hum of the flutes added a dreamlike quality to the scene. It was a moment that felt suspended in time, both fragile and eternal, and she wanted to hold it carefully in her memory. By the time the first part of the ceremony was completed, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her hands were slightly trembling, her heart still racing, but she also felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The king had followed her guidance flawlessly, and the ceremony had moved forward with grace and dignity. She realized that she had grown through the experience, learning not just about the steps and gestures, but about herself, her courage, patience, and ability to embrace responsibility. As the participants and onlookers took a short pause, the young bride-to-be stood quietly, letting herself breathe for a moment. She watched the king, who stood with a calm, appreciative expression. She could feel the weight of the day ahead, knowing that more steps, more traditions, and more moments of guidance awaited her. But for the first time, she also felt confident that she could face them. She had taken her first steps into something larger than herself, and she realized that every small action, every careful gesture had meaning. Her mind wandered briefly to the future. She thought about the stories she would tell, the lesson she would pass on, and the memory of this day that she would carry forever. She felt proud not just of herself, but of the community that had trusted her, the elders who had supported her, and the king who had shown patience and respect. The young bride-to-be understood that today was more than just a ceremony. It was a moment of connection, learning, and courage. As she prepared to continue with the next part of the ceremony, she straightened her posture, adjusted her dress, and took a deep breath. She whispered quietly to herself once more, "I can do this." And this time, there was no hesitation in her voice. She felt ready, aware that the journey ahead would test her, but also knowing that she had already begun to rise to the occasion. The morning had brought her nervousness and excitement, but now it also brought strength, focus, and a sense of purpose that she had never known before. And so, with careful steps, a calm heart, and a mind alert to every detail, the young bride-to-be guided the Apache king through the beginning of the ceremony. Each movement, each word, each gesture was a reflection of her dedication, her courage, and her respect for the tradition she had been entrusted with. Though it was her first time, she carried herself with sincerity, and in doing so, she created a memory that would linger long after the sun had set and the ceremony had ended. The morning had already passed, and the young bride-to-be felt the warm sunlight on her face as the ceremony moved into its next stage. She had finished guiding the Apache king through the first part, and now, as the second part began, she felt both a growing confidence and a lingering nervousness. She knew that this stage was more complicated. There were new rituals, more precise steps, and symbolic gestures that required patience and understanding. Each movement had meaning, and she carried the weight of ensuring everything was done correctly. Yet she also felt a quiet excitement. This was her chance to show that she could manage the responsibility she had been given, and to create a moment of harmony and respect between tradition and the people involved. The ceremonial ground had grown livelier as more participants joined. Villagers had arranged themselves in neat lines, their eyes watching with curiosity and admiration. Children peered from behind their parents, trying to see every detail. The elders had taken their seats at the front, their expressions calm but attentive, ready to observe every gesture and word. The air smelled faintly of incense, mixed with the sweet scent of flowers, creating a feeling of sacredness. Soft sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dancing shadows on the ground, and the sound of flutes and drums created a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the young bride-to-be. She approached the king, who was standing patiently, his eyes calm, yet alert, following her every movement. She felt a flutter in her chest as she whispered, "This part is more detailed. I will guide you carefully." He nodded slightly, a small smile touching his lips, showing that he trusted her. That trust made her feel a little braver, but it also reminded her how much responsibility she carried. She knew that every instruction she gave needed to be clear, and every gesture needed to be precise. There was no room for hesitation, yet she reminded herself that sincerity mattered more than perfection. The first step of this part involved a series of hand gestures and symbolic movements. The bride-to-be had practiced these countless times, but the pressure of the moment made her fingers tense. She took a deep breath, positioning herself beside the king, and began to demonstrate the movement slowly. "Place your right hand over your heart," she whispered, guiding his hand carefully. He followed exactly, moving in time with her instructions. She felt a small wave of relief and a sense of satisfaction. Seeing him respond with patience and respect reminded her that she was capable of leading him through this part, despite her own nervousness. As the ceremony continued, the rituals became more complex. There were sequences of steps that had to be performed in a specific order, and small mistakes could disrupt the flow. She focused intently, carefully watching each movement and gesture. She whispered instructions softly, repeating words she had memorized for weeks. The king moved with grace and attentiveness, showing his respect for her guidance. She could feel the rhythm of the ceremony in her own body, matching her steps to the beat of the drums and the flow of the music. It was as if the entire ground had become a living, breathing part of the ritual. She noticed a moment of quiet laughter from some of the younger participants, as one of them had stumbled over a small step. Instead of feeling embarrassed or frustrated, the young bride-to-be smiled gently and encouraged them. "Take your time. Focus on the meaning, not just the steps," she said softly. Her calm and gentle guidance reflected the patience she had learned during her preparation. Even though it was her first time, she was becoming a natural leader in the ceremony, helping others find their rhythm while guiding the king. The sense of responsibility weighed on her, but it also gave her purpose and strength. At one point, she guided the king to a central part of the ceremonial ground, where a small fire had been prepared. The flames danced gently, casting a warm glow on the surrounding flowers and decorations. The fire was symbolic, representing strength, courage, and the spirit of the community. She explained quietly to the king, "This fire is more than warmth. It represents the spirit that connects us all." He nodded, placing his hands over the fire carefully, and she could see a look of understanding in his eyes. It reminded her that this ceremony was not just a series of steps. It was about connection, respect, and shared meaning. As they moved through the rituals, she noticed small details that she had never truly appreciated before. The way the wind carried the scent of the flowers, the way the sunlight reflected off the decorations, and the soft rustling of leaves created a sense of calm and beauty. She realized that every element of the ceremony had a purpose, a story, and a memory attached to it. Guiding the king through this part was not only about teaching him the steps. It was about sharing the essence of her culture, the history of her people, and the emotions that had been carried forward through generations. Despite the growing confidence, there were moments when nervousness returned. One step required precise timing and careful positioning, and for a moment she worried she might mislead the king. Her heart raced, and her hands trembled slightly. But she took a slow, steadying breath, remembering the words of her mother. Sincerity matters more than perfection. She whispered the instructions clearly, demonstrating each movement again, and the king followed her guidance without hesitation. Relief and pride washed over her. She realized that her courage wasn't about being flawless. It was about staying calm, focused, and sincere, even when she felt uncertain. The king, noticing her careful guidance and occasional hesitation, offered small words of encouragement. "You are doing well," he said softly, with a warm smile. Those words, simple as they were, strengthened her confidence. She realized that the trust between them was growing, not because she was perfect, but because she was genuine, attentive, and dedicated. Each whispered instruction, each careful demonstration, strengthened the bond of respect and trust that was forming between them. As the second part of the ceremony progressed, the bride-to-be guided the king through a series of symbolic offerings. Small baskets of flowers, grains, and herbs were presented and arranged with care. She showed him how to place each item with respect, explaining their significance. "These represent abundance, growth, and gratitude," she whispered. The king listened carefully, handling each item with the same care she demonstrated. She noticed the way his eyes reflected appreciation for the meaning behind every gesture. In that moment, she felt the power of shared understanding and the beauty of passing on traditions. She also noticed how the surrounding community responded to their actions. Villagers and participants watched with interest, some nodding quietly, others whispering to each other in approval. The elders, sitting calmly, occasionally exchanged glances that conveyed their silent recognition of her effort. Their subtle encouragement reminded her that she was part of something much larger than herself. She was not only guiding the king, but also honoring the history, culture, and values of her people. Each action she took carried significance beyond the moment itself. During a brief pause in the ceremony, she whispered again to the king, almost shyly, "I've never done this before." She expected perhaps surprise or concern, but the king's calm gaze and gentle smile reassured her. "You are guiding with care," he said quietly. "That is what matters." She felt a wave of relief and warmth. It was a reminder that authenticity and sincerity could carry her through, even when fear or uncertainty appeared. That small exchange strengthened her determination, reminding her that courage often comes from honesty and humility, not perfection. The bride-to-be moved gracefully, guiding the king through the final steps of this stage of the ceremony. She watched as he followed her instructions carefully, placing his hands, bowing and speaking the sacred words in the correct order. The rhythmic sound of drums and flutes filled the air, creating a sense of unity and continuity. She realized that the ceremony was not just about tradition. It was about creating a shared experience, a connection between the participants, the community, and the history they were honoring. Every movement, every gesture, was a thread in the larger tapestry of meaning. By the time this stage of the ceremony was completed, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Her nervousness had been replaced with a growing confidence, and she had learned to trust herself, her preparation, and her understanding of the traditions. She noticed the approving glances of the elders, the gentle smiles of the villagers, and the calm, appreciative expression of the king. It was a moment of recognition, not for perfection but for sincerity, care, and dedication. She paused briefly, taking in the scene around her. The ceremonial ground was filled with a sense of harmony and peace. Flowers swayed gently in the breeze, sunlight glimmered off decorations, and the soft music of flutes and drums continued to create a sacred rhythm. She felt a sense of connection to the people, the land, and the history that had been passed down through generations. Guiding the king through this part of the ceremony had been challenging, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. As she prepared to move on to the next part, she adjusted her dress, straightened her posture, and took a deep breath. She whispered to herself, "I am ready for what comes next." She knew that more steps awaited, more rituals to guide, and more opportunities to demonstrate her courage and respect for tradition. Yet she felt prepared. She had faced her fears, guided someone important with care, and experienced the quiet power of sincerity. That knowledge gave her a steady confidence as she stepped forward, ready to continue the journey of the ceremony. With careful steps and a focused heart, she led the Apache king through the second part of the ceremony. Each gesture, each word, and each movement reflected her growing confidence, her respect for tradition, and her dedication to the community. Though it was still her first time, she had learned that courage and sincerity were the keys to guiding others, and she felt ready to face the challenges and joys that the rest of the ceremony would bring. The afternoon sun had climbed higher, casting a warm, golden light over the ceremonial ground. The young bride-to-be felt the soft heat on her skin and the gentle breeze that carried the scent of flowers and incense. By this point, she had guided the Apache king through several important rituals, and her confidence had grown. Yet, the third part of the ceremony was known to be the most delicate. It required not only precision, but also emotional awareness. Every gesture had deeper meaning, every word spoken carried intention, and she knew that this was the stage where the connection between herself, the king, and the community would deepen. As she prepared to begin, she paused for a moment to gather herself. She looked around at the ceremonial ground, noticing the way the flowers swayed in the wind, the sunlight reflecting softly off the decorations, and the gentle movement of the crowd. Villagers were standing or sitting quietly, their eyes attentive, watching every action with respect. Children peered from behind their parents, wide-eyed and curious, trying to absorb every detail. The elders were seated with calm expressions, their eyes reflecting pride and trust. She felt a quiet hum of energy in the air, almost as if the entire ground was alive, anticipating this next stage. She stepped toward the king and whispered softly, "This part is about balance and respect. It will require focus, patience, and care." He nodded slightly, his calm gaze meeting hers, as if to say that he trusted her completely. She felt a small wave of reassurance. His trust, she realized, was not a weight but a gift. It reminded her that leadership was not about perfection, but about sincerity, empathy, and dedication. That thought steadied her nerves as she prepared to begin guiding him through the more intricate rituals ahead. The first gesture of this stage involved the arrangement of sacred symbols in a circular formation. Each symbol represented a value: courage, unity, wisdom, and humility. She showed the king where to place each symbol and how to handle them with care. "These symbols remind us of the qualities we must carry in our lives," she whispered. The king followed her guidance attentively, moving his hands with gentle precision. She noticed the subtle way he absorbed the meaning of each step, not just the physical action. That awareness reminded her why this part of the ceremony was so important. It was not simply about ritual. It was about understanding and honoring the deeper purpose behind every gesture. As they moved through this stage, she felt a mix of nervousness and pride. She remembered her early days of practice when she had struggled with these steps. The movements seemed complicated, and she had worried constantly about making mistakes. But now, as she guided the king with calm determination, she realized how much she had grown. She understood that preparation, focus, and patience were more powerful than talent alone. Every small success, every correct step, gave her confidence and reminded her that courage often comes from persistence and care. The king, noticing her attentiveness, offered quiet encouragement from time to time. "You are doing this beautifully," he said softly, his voice carrying reassurance. Those words gave her strength, but she also noticed how they carried deeper meaning. The ceremony was as much about connection as it was about tradition. His encouragement reflected a respect for her effort, and in turn, she felt a greater responsibility to guide him with care. Their shared focus created a silent understanding, a bond that grew stronger with each gesture, each whispered instruction, and each step taken with intention. At one point, a small misstep occurred. One of the sacred symbols was slightly out of place, and she felt her heart skip a beat. The young bride-to-be paused, gently repositioning the symbol while whispering instructions to the king. She felt her hands tremble slightly, but she reminded herself to stay calm. The king did not appear frustrated or critical. He moved with patience, following her guidance carefully. That moment taught her an important lesson. Mistakes are not failures but opportunities to demonstrate poise, problem-solving, and sincerity. She smiled softly to herself, realizing that courage included handling unexpected challenges with grace. The rhythm of the ceremony continued with soft music from flutes and drums. She guided the king through a series of gestures that symbolized gratitude and respect for ancestors. Each movement required a delicate balance of precision and feeling. She whispered the words of the prayers, her voice gentle yet steady, and the king repeated them carefully. She could see the depth of his concentration and the care he took to honor each gesture. Watching him, she felt a quiet admiration. This was not simply a role she was performing, it was a shared experience, a bridge between generations, cultures, and hearts. As they progressed, the young bride-to-be noticed her own emotions becoming more present. There was a sense of humility and awe that she had never felt before. Guiding someone as important as the Apache king, while honoring the traditions of her community, was both an honor and a responsibility that weighed heavily on her heart. She felt the eyes of the villagers on her, the calm pride of the elders, and the patient trust of the king. Each observation reminded her that this ceremony was bigger than herself. It was about connection, respect, and the enduring power of tradition. During a quiet moment, she whispered softly again, almost to herself, "I hope I am doing this right." The king turned his gaze toward her and offered a gentle smile. "You are guiding with care," he said, his voice calm and sincere. "That is what matters most." Those words struck her deeply. It was not perfection that mattered but intention. She realized that her sincerity, patience, and willingness to learn were more valuable than flawless execution. That realization strengthened her resolve, giving her the courage to continue guiding him through the delicate rituals of this stage. The bride-to-be then led the king through a symbolic offering. Small vessels containing grains, herbs, and water were placed carefully in a ceremonial pattern. She explained quietly the meaning of each item. The grains represented sustenance, the herbs symbolized healing, and the water reflected life and renewal. The king followed her guidance attentively, handling each item with respect. She could see the appreciation in his eyes, and it reminded her that the ceremony was about more than actions. It was about understanding, honoring, and feeling the significance behind each gesture. As the ceremony continued, the young bride-to-be noticed small details that made her heart swell. The way the sunlight glinted off the water in the vessels, the way the breeze carried the scent of flowers, and the way the community moved and watched in quiet respect. All of it created a sense of sacredness and beauty. She realized that the ceremony was not simply a task to complete. It was a living, breathing experience. Every step, every word, every gesture was part of a story that connected the past to the present and passed wisdom and respect to the future. Despite her growing confidence, moments of doubt still appeared. She worried that she might misstep, forget a word, or guide the king incorrectly. Each time those thoughts arose, she took a deep breath, focused on the present, and reminded herself of the lessons she had learned. Her preparation, practice, and dedication were her foundation, and sincerity was her guide. She whispered instructions carefully, demonstrating each step and guiding the king patiently. The king followed, his calm presence reinforcing her confidence and reminding her that trust and respect mattered as much as technical accuracy. The ceremony then moved to a stage of reflection and connection. Participants were invited to silently contemplate the meaning of the rituals, the values represented, and their place within the community. The bride-to-be guided the king through a series of silent gestures, each meant to honor ancestors and express gratitude. She felt the power of the quiet moments, the way the collective focus of the community created a sense of unity. She realized that leadership was not just about action, but about presence. Her calm, attentive guidance allowed the king to experience the depth of the ceremony fully. At one point, she noticed a child struggling to perform a gesture correctly. She moved gently toward the child, whispered encouragement, and demonstrated the movement slowly. The child's face lit up with understanding, and the young bride-to-be felt a warm sense of pride. Guiding someone through learning, whether it was the king or a small child, reminded her that patience, care, and sincerity were the keys to meaningful leadership. Every gesture, no matter how small, had the power to inspire confidence and respect. As the afternoon wore on, the bride-to-be and the king moved through the final steps of this stage. Each action was performed with greater confidence, yet with the same attention to detail and meaning. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. Her nervousness had been replaced with a calm focus, a clear understanding of her responsibility, and an awareness of the honor she carried. She noticed approving glances from the elders, quiet nods from villagers, and the patient, attentive gaze of the king. Their silent recognition was a powerful affirmation of her effort, sincerity, and courage. She paused for a moment, taking in the scene around her. The ceremonial ground seemed alive with quiet energy, the soft music blending with the wind and the gentle movement of flowers. The young bride-to-be reflected on how far she had come, from initial nervousness to focused confidence, from self-doubt to a sense of purpose and pride. She realized that this part of the ceremony had not only tested her ability to guide, but also helped her understand herself more deeply. Courage, patience, and sincerity were not abstract concepts. They were living qualities she was embodying in real time. With a final deep breath, she whispered to herself, "I can continue. I am ready." She turned to the king, who gave her a gentle nod of encouragement, and together they prepared to move into the next stage of the ceremony. She felt a renewed sense of determination, knowing that there were still rituals to perform, steps to guide, and moments to honor. But she also knew that she had grown stronger, more confident, and more connected to the traditions, the community, and herself. As the third part of the ceremony came to a close, she guided the king to the center of the ceremonial ground. The symbols, offerings, and gestures they had performed now held a deeper meaning. The community, watching quietly, seemed to sense the harmony and respect that had been cultivated. She realized that though this was her first time, her sincerity, patience, and careful guidance had created a meaningful and memorable experience. She felt pride not in perfection but in dedication, courage, and respect. The sun had started its slow descent, casting a soft, golden glow over the ceremonial ground. The young bride-to-be felt the warmth on her skin and the gentle pull of a breeze that carried the scent of flowers and incense. By this point in the day, she had guided the Apache king through several stages of the ceremony. She had moved from nervous anticipation to cautious confidence, and now, as the fourth part began, she felt a quiet steadiness within her. This part was significant. It required her to demonstrate not just knowledge of the rituals, but also poise, presence, and the ability to inspire confidence in others. She knew that the success of this stage depended on her calmness and sincerity. The ceremonial ground had grown more vibrant. Villagers had gathered closer, forming a circle around the central area. Their faces reflected a mixture of curiosity, respect, and quiet admiration. Children whispered softly to each other, peeking from behind their parents, while elders sat with composed expressions, their eyes attentive and approving. The soft rhythm of drums and flutes continued, blending with the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of birds. The young bride-to-be paused for a moment, taking in the scene. The energy of the community, combined with the sacredness of the rituals, created an atmosphere that was both humbling and inspiring. She approached the king, who stood patiently, his posture calm and his gaze steady. She whispered softly, "This part will test balance and understanding. It requires focus and care." He nodded gently, his eyes reflecting trust. That simple acknowledgement gave her reassurance. She realized that guiding someone like the king was as much about emotional connection as it was about ceremonial steps. His trust reminded her that sincerity and patience were the most powerful tools she could carry. She straightened her posture, lifted her chin slightly, and prepared to guide him through the next stage. The first steps of this part involved symbolic gestures of unity and respect. The bride-to-be demonstrated each movement carefully, showing the king how to bow, place his hands, and maintain a gentle rhythm with the accompanying music. She whispered instructions softly, guiding him step by step. His attention and patience made her feel supported, and she began to notice a growing sense of ease in herself. She realized that confidence came not from perfection, but from presence, the ability to remain calm, attentive, and sincere even when the tasks were challenging. As they moved through the rituals, she felt a subtle shift within herself. Where she had once been nervous and unsure, she now felt a quiet strength. She noticed the king's careful movements and realized that he was following her guidance with trust. That trust was both a gift and a responsibility, and it reminded her that the ceremony was more than a series of steps. It was about creating harmony, connection, and respect. She adjusted her tone, her posture, and her gestures, ensuring that every instruction was clear and every demonstration was precise. A small challenge arose when the king was asked to perform a series of intricate hand movements. The young bride-to-be had practiced these countless times, yet seeing him hesitate slightly made her heart race. She moved closer, whispered encouragement, and demonstrated the steps once more. The king followed carefully, his calm patience reflecting his respect for her guidance. She felt a surge of relief and pride. That moment reminded her that leadership was not about rushing or controlling. It was about patience, clarity, and gentle encouragement. Even small acts of reassurance could create harmony and trust. The bride-to-be then guided the king to a central table where ceremonial offerings had been arranged. Each item had a symbolic meaning. Grains represented nourishment, herbs reflected healing, and water symbolized life. She whispered explanations for each item, ensuring that he understood the significance behind every gesture. The king listened attentively, handling each offering with care and respect. Watching him, she realized that this part of the ceremony was about more than physical actions. It was about understanding, honoring, and experiencing the deeper meaning of tradition. The soft hum of music and the rhythmic beat of drums created a sense of continuity, connecting each moment to the next. She moved gracefully, guiding the king through gestures of gratitude and reflection. Each movement was deliberate, each instruction gentle yet clear. She noticed the quiet focus of the participants around them, the way villagers leaned in slightly, the soft expressions of children, the composed nods of elders. She understood that her role was not just to guide the king, but to help the entire community feel the depth and significance of the ceremony. There were moments when her mind whispered doubts. What if she made a mistake? What if she gave the wrong instruction? Each time these thoughts arose, she paused, took a deep breath, and reminded herself of her training and preparation. She whispered instructions slowly, demonstrated movements carefully, and guided the king with patience and attention. His calm, attentive presence reinforced her confidence. She realized that sincerity, patience, and mindfulness were more important than flawless execution. The ceremony was about connection, respect, and intention, not perfection. During a particularly quiet moment, the young bride-to-be whispered to the king almost shyly, "I am still learning, but I hope I am helping." The king smiled gently and replied, "You are guiding with care. That is what matters most." His words filled her with warmth and a sense of assurance. She understood that honesty and humility were just as important as skill and preparation. That simple exchange strengthened her resolve and reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting with sincerity despite it. As they continued, the bride-to-be guided the king through a series of reflective gestures. They paused to honor the ancestors, placing offerings and performing symbolic bows. She felt the quiet power of these moments, the way stillness could carry meaning, the way gestures could express gratitude and reverence. She noticed the reactions of the community around her, subtle nods of approval, quiet smiles, and attentive eyes. She realized that her role was helping everyone present feel the depth and significance of each action, not just guiding the king. The rhythm of the ceremony created a sense of flow, linking every movement, every word, and every gesture into a cohesive experience. The bride-to-be moved with confidence, guiding the king through each step with precision and care. She noticed how the sunlight highlighted the ceremonial objects, how the breeze carried the fragrance of flowers, and how the music seemed to echo the heartbeat of the community. Every detail enhanced the sacredness of the moment, and she felt honored to play such an important role. There was a moment when a younger participant hesitated during a gesture. The bride-to-be moved gracefully toward them, whispered encouragement, and demonstrated the step with patience. The child's eyes brightened with understanding, and she felt a warm sense of pride. Helping others navigate the ceremony reminded her that leadership was not about authority. It was about guidance, patience, and compassion. Every gesture, no matter how small, had the power to inspire confidence and respect. As the stage progressed, she guided the king through the symbolic sharing of gifts. Small items representing unity, respect, and wisdom were exchanged between participants. She explained quietly what each item represented, and the king handled them with care and reverence. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment seeing him engage with the symbolism, understanding the meaning behind the actions. It reminded her that this ceremony was more than a sequence of rituals. It was a living expression of values, connection, and tradition. By the time this part of the ceremony neared its close, the young bride-to-be felt a quiet pride. She had navigated intricate gestures, guided the king with patience, and helped the community experience the depth of tradition. Her nervousness had mostly faded, replaced with a steady confidence and a sense of accomplishment. She noticed the approving glances of the elders, the quiet smiles of villagers, and the king's calm, attentive expression. Their recognition affirmed her effort, dedication, and sincerity. She paused briefly to catch her breath and reflect. The ceremonial ground was filled with a gentle energy, the soft rhythm of music blending with the rustle of leaves and the movement of flowers. She realized how much she had grown since the start of the day, from nervous anticipation to calm confidence, from self-doubt to purposeful presence. She understood that courage was not about being perfect, but about showing up, being sincere, and guiding others with care. Each step she had taken, each whispered instruction, and each gesture of guidance had contributed to a meaningful and memorable experience. The young bride-to-be whispered quietly to herself, "I am ready for the final stage." She adjusted her dress, straightened her posture, and took a deep breath. She looked at the king, who returned her gaze with a calm, encouraging nod. She felt a renewed sense of determination, knowing that the last part of the ceremony would test her focus and composure one final time. Yet she was no longer afraid. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more connected to the traditions, the community, and herself. With steady steps and a clear heart, she guided the king through the remaining gestures and symbolic actions of this stage. Each movement was deliberate, each word spoken with intention, and each gesture carried respect and meaning. She noticed the quiet attentiveness of the community, the approving nods of elders, and the gentle encouragement of the king. It was a moment of harmony, connection, and shared understanding. She realized that though it was her first time, her sincerity, patience, and careful guidance had created an experience that would be remembered long after the day ended. As the fourth part of the ceremony drew to a close, she felt a mixture of relief, pride, and calm satisfaction. She had navigated the complex rituals, maintained composure, and guided the king and community with care. Her nervousness had been replaced with a steady confidence and a sense of purpose. She knew that the final part of the ceremony awaited, but she also understood that she had already grown through the experience, learning the value of patience, presence, and sincerity. The late afternoon sun bathed the ceremonial ground in a warm, golden light, turning every flower, decoration, and ripple of water into a soft, glowing reflection. The young bride-to-be felt a mixture of pride, anticipation, and quiet nervousness. This was the final stage of the ceremony, the culmination of hours of careful guidance, patience, and attention to detail. She had led the Apache king through every ritual, every symbolic gesture, and every step of tradition. Now, the moment had come to bring the ceremony to its completion, ensuring that everything ended with dignity, harmony, and a deep sense of connection. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze brush against her face, and whispered to herself, "I can do this. I am ready." Her steps were steady as she moved toward the king, whose calm gaze met hers. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes, a reassurance that reminded her she was capable, that her guidance had been thoughtful, and that sincerity mattered more than perfection. She felt a rush of gratitude, not just for the trust the king had shown her, but for the lessons she had learned through every stage of this ceremony. The ceremonial ground was now fully alive with energy. Villagers and participants stood in a wide circle, their faces reflecting curiosity, respect, and quiet admiration. Children leaned forward to see every movement, and elders watched with composed smiles, silently acknowledging the young bride-to-be's dedication. The soft rhythms of flutes and drums created a gentle heartbeat for the final part of the ritual, giving a sense of unity and calm focus. She felt the weight of responsibility, but it was tempered with a quiet joy, the realization that she was guiding something much bigger than herself. She began the final steps with a series of symbolic offerings, each representing a value that the ceremony sought to honor: courage, respect, unity, and gratitude. She explained each offering softly to the king, whispering the significance of the gestures as he followed her carefully. The king moved with attentiveness and respect, placing each item with deliberate care. She noticed the depth in his eyes, the focus on understanding rather than simply performing, and felt a warm sense of accomplishment. This stage was not just about the actions themselves, but the connection they created between the participants, the community, and the traditions being honored. The bride-to-be guided the king through a series of gestures meant to symbolize harmony and shared understanding. Each movement required balance and calm presence. She whispered instructions, demonstrating gently with her own hands. At one point, the king paused slightly, as if considering the meaning behind the gestures, and she felt her heart beat faster. Could he sense her nervousness? But then he continued with careful attention, a small smile of acknowledgement crossing his face. That simple moment reminded her that sincerity and focus were more important than flawless execution. As they progressed, she noticed small details that filled her with awe. The sunlight reflecting on ceremonial objects, the breeze carrying the gentle fragrance of flowers, and the soft rustle of leaves created a feeling of sacredness. Villagers leaned in slightly, children watched with wide eyes, and elders exchanged approving glances. She understood that her guidance was helping everyone feel the depth and beauty of the rituals, not just assisting the king. Her role was to maintain calm, clarity, and attention, and she realized that even small gestures of care had a profound impact. There were moments of challenge. A sequence of hand movements required precise timing, and her hands trembled slightly as she demonstrated them. But she reminded herself to breathe, focus, and trust in her preparation. The king followed attentively, his calm patience reassuring her that she was guiding him correctly. She whispered softly, "Take your time," and he responded with a careful nod. Those moments of shared focus, of quiet patience, strengthened the bond of trust between them. She realized that guiding someone through tradition was as much about emotional connection as it was about physical gestures. The music shifted subtly, signaling the approaching conclusion of the ceremony. She guided the king to a central position, where symbolic offerings had been arranged in a circular pattern. The circle represented unity, continuity, and the enduring connection between generations. She whispered the significance of each item, and the king handled them with deliberate care. She watched as he placed each offering in its proper place, understanding its meaning. In that moment, she felt the full weight of her accomplishment, not simply in completing the steps, but in creating a meaningful, shared experience that honored the traditions of her community. The bride-to-be noticed a few participants hesitating during gestures, and she moved gracefully among them, whispering encouragement and demonstrating the movements with patience. Children smiled as they learned, elders nodded with quiet approval, and the king continued to follow her guidance with calm attentiveness. She realized that leadership, even in a ceremonial context, was about patience, presence, and genuine care. Her sincerity inspired confidence and respect, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment in seeing the ceremony unfold harmoniously. During a quiet moment, she whispered softly to the king, almost shyly, "I have never done this before, but I hope I am guiding well." He turned his gaze toward her and smiled warmly. "You are guiding with care. "That is what matters most," he said. Those words filled her with warmth and assurance. She understood that courage was not about perfection, but about sincerity, dedication, and the willingness to take responsibility despite fear. That small exchange reinforced her confidence as she guided the final gestures of the ceremony. The rhythm of drums and flutes continued, blending with the soft rustle of leaves and the subtle movement of participants. The bride-to-be guided the king through gestures of gratitude, respect, and reflection. Each step was deliberate, each action meaningful, and each whispered instruction a reminder of the connection between past, present, and future. She felt the quiet power of the moment, the way stillness could convey meaning, the way gestures could express reverence, and the way shared focus could unite a community. By the time they reached the final symbolic gesture, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had navigated every stage of the ceremony with patience, clarity, and attention to detail. She had guided the king through rituals, shared their meanings, and created a sense of connection that went beyond words. Her nervousness had transformed into confidence, her hesitation into poise, and her uncertainty into a quiet pride. She realized that she had grown through the experience, learning the importance of sincerity, patience, and dedication. The final gesture involved a symbolic sharing of unity. Participants joined hands in a circle around the ceremonial ground, and the bride-to-be guided the king to the center. She whispered instructions softly, showing him the movement and explaining its significance. The king followed attentively, his hands steady and his gaze focused. Villagers and participants joined in, creating a sense of harmony and connection. The sunlight reflected off the circle, the flowers swayed gently, and the soft music of flutes and drums created a peaceful, unifying rhythm. It was a moment of completion, reflection, and shared understanding. As the ceremony concluded, the young bride-to-be felt a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had guided the king with care, helped the community experience the depth of the traditions, and embraced her own first-time nervousness with courage. The elders offered quiet nods of approval, villagers whispered words of admiration, and children clapped softly, their eyes shining with excitement. The king, standing beside her, gave a gentle, appreciative smile. She felt a warm sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had honored the tradition and her role with sincerity. She took a step back, letting herself breathe for a moment, and looked around the ceremonial ground. The circle of participants, the arrangement of offerings, and the presence of the king reflected a harmony she had helped create. She realized that this ceremony was more than a series of rituals. It was a living, breathing experience that connected people, generations, and values. Her heart swelled with pride, not for herself alone, but for the community, the tradition, and the shared meaning they had cultivated together. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the ceremonial ground, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had guided the Apache king through every stage of the ceremony, learned the power of patience and sincerity, and experienced the deep meaning of tradition firsthand. She whispered softly to herself, "I have done it. I have learned, guided, and grown." The king turned to her, his expression calm and respectful, and said, "You have honored the ceremony and our people. Thank you." Those simple words carried a depth that made her heart swell. The community began to disperse slowly, with participants and villagers quietly acknowledging her effort. Children waved, elders nodded, and the soft rhythm of the music faded into the evening air. The young bride-to-be stood quietly, reflecting on the day. She had started with nervousness and uncertainty, but through patience, focus, and sincerity, she had guided an important ceremony with care. She realized that first experiences, though challenging, were opportunities for growth, courage, and understanding. As the final light of the sun dipped below the horizon, she felt a sense of calm satisfaction. She had learned not only the steps of the ceremony, but also the deeper meaning of connection, respect, and shared experience. The day had tested her patience, focus, and courage, yet it had also rewarded her with confidence, pride, and a profound sense of belonging. She understood that leadership, care, and sincerity could create harmony and inspire respect, even in moments of nervousness and uncertainty. The young bride-to-be took one last look at the ceremonial ground, now quiet and serene. She knew that this day would remain in her memory forever, not just for the rituals performed, but for the growth, courage, and connection it had brought. She smiled softly, feeling the weight of responsibility she had carried transform into a sense of accomplishment and pride. She had guided the Apache king, honored her community, and discovered her own strength. With a deep, steady breath, she stepped away from the center of the ceremonial ground, feeling a quiet joy and gratitude. The day had been challenging, beautiful, and meaningful, and she knew that she had embraced her first-time experience with courage and sincerity. As she walked toward her family, who were waiting with warm smiles and gentle words, she felt a sense of completion, knowing that she had not only guided a ceremony but had grown, connected, and honored tradition in a way she would never forget.